Hi, I'm here to welcome you to today's session and introduce you to our speaker. Sue Clabaugh is the Assistant Director of Learning Technologies and Environments in the Division of Information Technology at the University of Maryland. Her primary responsibility is the Instructional Facilities Group, which designs and maintains classrooms and AV systems, manages student computer labs, and supports users. Before joining OIT, Sue was the Director of Distance Learning in the Office of Continuing Education and Director of the Educational Technology Center in the College of Education. Sue also served as a Special Assistant to the Provost, where she was responsible for starting the university's cable television operation and managing the campus video production facilities. Sue is the co-author and editor of Classroom Design Manual, which is in its 3rd edition. She consults and regularly presents at professional meetings on classroom design, technology integration, and media services. Sue was a member of the CCUMC Board of Directors and various committees, and recently served on the Infocom Professional Education and Training Committee.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. This morning I'm going to be talking about transforming computer labs into more flexible, inviting learning environments. I think this is a situation that a lot of us are facing, and we took a good bit of time studying and trying to make sense out of all this before we embarked on our journey here. Please feel free to interrupt with questions at any time if you have them. It doesn't bother me. Okay. Give you a little idea of what the University of Maryland is like. We are basically a very large public institution. As you can see, we've got 37,600 students, lots of faculty, GAs, staff, 12 colleges, 345 general purpose classrooms spread out all over campus. About 75% of them have technology at this point. And then we have about 100 other department rooms with technology. And that's where I've focused most of my efforts until recently. And the computer labs on our campus are divided into kind of 2 categories. Colleges and departments have a lot of their own labs. What I'm going to be talking about today are the open computer labs that are available to any student on campus. And just as a point of reference, my group didn't take over responsibility for the labs until 2008. So we've just been working on this for the last 4 years. So that may explain some of the things that I'll be showing you later about the previous condition of the labs. Anyway, our status in 2008 is we had 7 computer labs. They were dispersed all across campus, 6 different locations, 263 computers of varying types. Some of the labs are open 24/7. Others were closed in the evenings and on weekends. For printing, we had our own homegrown pay-for-print system that was definitely showing its age. So before we go any further, I'd like to get a sense of what your situation is like and the public computer labs at your institution. How many of you don't have any? I've actually heard there are places that don't. Oh, okay, good. How many of you have the number of labs increasing? Number of labs. Okay, that's interesting. Number of labs is staying about the same. Okay. And number of labs decreasing? Few of us in that category. How many of your labs are kind of dual purpose? They serve both as labs for the students as well as computer classrooms? Any of those? Okay, so we've got a pretty good mix, and that's helpful to know. Let me give you a little bit of the context. Obviously, we were in a bad economy, and we had had 5 years of no tuition increases. Obviously, that put a strain on the university budget. So one of my first mandates when I took over the labs was to try to find ways to operate more efficiently. That was a given. Also, the university had just implemented a climate action plan that called for major improvements in energy conservation everywhere on campus. All of our new buildings are going to be LEED certified as one example. So we had to reduce the energy usage in our labs. Those were two big imperatives that we had to address and address quickly. Actually, that turned out to be an opportunity for us because we were able to take a fresh look at the labs. They'd been kind of limping along and modest, minor little changes and improvements, but nobody had ever stepped back and taken a new look at them, so we were in a position to be able to do that. Basically, the goal was to make them more responsive to the users and to operate more efficiently. So our first thing was to jump right in and start trying to figure out what was going on in the labs. We reviewed a lot of the usage statistics and schedules for the past several years. We evaluated the condition and layout of the facilities, including the quality of furnishings. You'll get a laugh out of some of the pictures I'll be showing you in a moment. We analyzed the energy usage. We got input from the users, the students. We reviewed budgets to see if we could identify some areas for potential economies. And we looked at the staffing and support models we were using for the lab. So we tried to be comprehensive in looking at everything. And we learned a lot. First and most obvious was a lot of the lab equipment was old and inefficient, very old and inefficient. Some of the facilities that opened in the mid-'80s had never been renovated. In other words, they were older than the students who were using them, with no major changes other than they'd get a new computer when the old ones needed replacement. All of them had individual carrels or tables with installed desktop computers on them, that traditional lab approach, and there weren't really any places for group work or laptop users. This is an example of one of those labs done in the mid-1980s. You notice the lovely color scheme. Fortunately, the pattern in the carpet hid some of the worst stains, so it didn't look quite so objectionable. But it was dark and dingy. It was in the basement of one of our residence halls, and it was an embarrassment, to be real honest. Even labs that had been renovated to some extent in the past still needed a lot of work. This was one of our larger labs in a parking garage, of all things. When they were building a parking garage, they decided there was some extra space there. Why not put a lab there? Because the original idea was commute and compute. I don't know that it actually works out that way a whole lot, but, and you do feel the rumble of cars as they drive over the ramp over the top of where the labs are. But anyway, need of new carpet, paint, and the only informal seating is that little used couch in the back there in that middle picture. So you can see that they weren't terribly creative approaches to how to set up labs. We also found in looking at the data that we had some extremely low-use labs. They were primarily in low-traffic areas. In other words, you'd be hard-pressed to find the lab, much less go to use it. So many times we would go in the labs and there'd be no one at all in the lab using it. We also, as all of us know, discovered that students' personal access to computing devices and computing resources has increased dramatically in recent years. They come with laptops, tablets, smartphones. They use their own technology to do a lot of the routine things like checking their email, browsing the internet, those kinds of things. And they want Wi-Fi and electrical outlets everywhere. We also found that the number of Mac users was increasing, and we weren't providing very good support for them, so we needed to do a better job in that area. And we found out, as we weren't surprised, that students still rely on the labs for certain things, mainly printing and some of the specialized software that we have in the labs that they don't have access to on their own computing devices. Well, one of the first things that we did was implement an energy conservation plan for the labs. And basically, we replaced all the computers with new Energy Star models. We replaced all the printers with much more efficient ones. The printers were quite old and were really energy hogs. We closed 2 of the low-use labs and reduced the number of computers overall, number of computers and printers overall. We still, believe it or not, had some old CRT monitors that we replaced with LCD monitors. And we also implemented some energy management procedures so that the computers were turned off during low use hours to conserve overnight and on weekends when they weren't being used. So here's where things stand after 4 years. Our number of labs has been reduced from 7 to 4. The number of locations, we're in 4 locations with our labs rather than 5. The total number of computers has dropped dramatically, as you can see, from 263 to 117. But the important thing to note is we have more parity between Windows and Macs than we did before. And we've also started deploying some dual boot Macs so that they can shift and be whichever one is needed at the time. And we basically got rid of the Linux machines. What we found was that the departments that had students needing Linux machines had their own labs provided. So it didn't make sense for us to continue providing that kind of support. And we also replaced the old homegrown printing system with Pharos. We also decided to really start planning to improve the facilities and services in the labs. In the fall of 2010, we started trying out a few things. In one of our larger labs, we set up some collaboration stations. As you can see there, we removed some of the computers in some of those lovely little carols and turned those into laptop connection stations. What we found was that the students were coming in with their laptops, scooting our computers out of the way and unplugging them and plugging theirs in. And then, of course, when they left, they'd never remember to plug theirs back in again, so we get all these reports that the computer's broken, something's wrong, and all of that. So we decided, you know, that's not how we should be doing it, and especially when we looked at usage numbers. We needed to do a better job of providing them with access. We also increased the percentage of Macs, including the dual boot machines. We also deployed the new pay-for-print system. And previously, we had only allowed printing in the labs, but we set it up so they can print from their laptops anywhere on campus and go pick it up wherever one of our printers is housed. And previously, all our printers had been in the labs, but we decided to experiment, and we set up both laptop connection stations and a printer in one of our very high-use classroom buildings. It didn't have a lab, but it had a lot of traffic in it, and that's actually proved to be very successful. Another activity that took place during this same period of time that we have been involved with and that had an impact on what we decided to do about the labs was the development of the Terrapin Learning Commons. And that meant in the spring of 2011, we closed our busiest computer lab. And everyone was kind of surprised. That's why our overall computer numbers are as low as they are. Because, and you can see, this lab was located in the libraries. It was actually set up on old library tables, if you can imagine, not exactly good furnishings for a lab. What we did was we worked with the libraries, and they incorporated the computers that we had had in our lab into the new Terrapin Learning Commons, so that it's not that there was a reduction in the overall number of machines available to students in the libraries, but we didn't have to be responsible for them anymore because the libraries already had a lot of their own machines and were moving ours into a group with theirs. So it was more efficient for them to take care of them than for us to continue to try to take care of them in that environment. But actually, the Terrapin Learning Commons is a project we had been working on jointly with the libraries since 2004. So it was a long time in coming. We would get to a point where we thought we were going to get started. Money didn't come, so we'd kind of hold for a while. Then all of a sudden, we got a new dean of libraries who was very supportive of the concept, and the libraries were able to get a special technology fee for the libraries that they were able to use to set up and do a lot of the renovations necessary to make the Terrapin Learning Commons happen. And basically, they took an entire floor of the library and renovated it. Pretty much everything in there. It's got more functional and attractive furnishings, expanded space for both individual use as well as a lot of group rooms that are equipped for students to use. They have access to more specialized hardware and software than they did before, better accommodations, much better for laptop and mobile device users. Wireless was beefed up tremendously. The entire building had a refresh of the network so that everything's now 1 gig to each outlet. They're providing more assistance to users as well. And starting this fall, some of our instructional designers are going to be spending more time over there and doing consulting individually with a lot of the faculty, since it's a much more centrally located place than our building, which is kind of on the edge of campus. So this, again, is part of that collaboration we have with the libraries that I think is going to end up being, making it a much more useful and attractive place for everybody, faculty and students. The other thing, and this was one of the guiding principles from the time we first started working on the TLC, was that we weren't defining it as a place. We were defining it as a learning environment that could be extended beyond the physical places where we would be starting out, like in the libraries. And that's one of the things that we kept in mind as we were trying to look at what can we do to the computer labs to make them more effective and efficient, and to make them complement some of the things that were going on in the Terrapin Learning Commons, so that students would find access to a lot of more similar things in both locations. Like the TLC, we plan to implement some of our next round of major changes in the fall. Feedback from the students indicated that the existing lab shouldn't go away, because we've had some administrators who look at the space with eager eyes and say, oh, I can think of other things to do with that space. But what we are hearing pretty firmly from the students is, no, we don't want you to get rid of the labs, but they need to be organized differently and provide different services. So that's been the approach we've taken. And actually, we started getting feedback from students in a variety of ways, starting particularly with a couple of small focus groups. One of them was actually of the students who work for us. We have about 40 of them. And they were a real good group and not hesitant at all to tell us what they thought. The other was a group of students affiliated with one of the living learning communities on campus. And these are, the one we particularly worked with was called College Park Scholars. And it's for freshmen and sophomore students. And they live in one of the residence halls in a community and have a lot of community events and activities and actually courses that are taught in areas of interest that they decide to select, whether it's their major or not. It's just something they're interested in. So we were able to get several of the College Park Scholars to help us too. And the comments from these student groups was very interested. One of the things we did was show them a lot of pictures of possibilities of what's been done at other institutions, as well as, you know, the lovely pictures of what we had. They had definite opinions about some of the topics, and there were others they didn't care for much at all, which is good, because we had, one of the suggestions that had been made to us previously was, well, maybe we need to have some kiosks spread around campus where they can walk up a computer and a monitor and they can check email quickly or do whatever. And they said, no, we don't need those. We have our computers, we have our laptops, we have our smartphones. We don't need that kind of a kiosk. So, okay, that got scratched off the list. Because there were so many different possibilities, we decided to turn one lab into kind of a sandbox where we could try out various approaches. And it was that ugly one with the patterned carpet and the lovely salmon and green color scheme. Basically, we gutted the room. New carpet, new paint, new furnishings, everything. We had hoped the renovations would be ready by the start of the fall, but we had construction issues. We still have one ongoing construction issue with the carpet. But basically, we wanted to make the space more open, so the students wanted us to try using tables rather than the carrels with the dividers so that they can kind of move around a little more. What we're finding is that even though we may have a computer set out, they may have 2 or 3 people gathered around one computer, and because there aren't the dividers, they can do that easily. So they like that ability to do that. We also set up several dual monitor multimedia development stations, which we hadn't had before. And we also installed counters with electrical outlets for laptops, kind of like you see in airports. So if a student wanted to come in real quickly on the way to class, plug in the laptop, print out something on the printer in the lab, and then head off to class, they could do it easily. We also provided whiteboard dividers on wheels that they can move around in the lab. We left some tables without computers at all to accommodate students using laptops. And often when we go in there, students are gathered around those tables with their own laptops, talking, working on a project, whatever. And they really like those, and the fact that the furniture is movable too, because they do tend to move it around. We also set up 3 collaboration stations with large shared monitors. The collaboration station up there was a little brainstorm I wanted to try, and actually the students really like it. It's just cafe booths. And for a small group of 2 to 4 students working, it's really nice. It's very comfortable, table in the middle, monitor at the end, and they really like that kind of seating. So we're probably going to try that in some other locations as well. To kind of get some feedback on what we had been doing and how they liked and didn't like various things and what things we needed to be focusing on in the future, we did a survey of students in the end of the spring semester. And basically it was a survey that we had pop up on the screens of the computers in the labs and had just a few short questions. And I was surprised. We got over 1,600 responses, which I thought was a lot, comparatively speaking. And what we did was we were able to identify what are the top 6 reasons students use our labs. It's a quiet place to work. That's not a surprise. I use one of the installed computers, so they still do want some computers available to them. It's open 24 hours because a couple of our labs are open 24/7. They come in to use the lab printer. Again, we kind of suspected that. They also come in to use software that they don't have on their computer, which, again, is not a big surprise, but it's nice to hear it reinforced. And I meet with other students to work on group projects. So these are reasons they like to come to the labs. Unfortunately, some of the reasons they come, we're not set up to support as well as we probably should be. We also tried to identify from the survey some areas needing improvement. We had a lot of open-ended comments kinds of things, so some of them really unloaded on us, which was helpful, actually. We found 6 areas that had the most ratings of poor or fair. Number of spaces for groups to work, not a surprise again. Attractive and inviting environment. Well, you saw that previous lab. I think attractive environment is not what you would use when you described that space in its earlier incarnation. So we were aware of needing to make things look a little better. The number of labs, they want more labs. Printing capability, they want printing capability in more places. And they want more spaces for individual laptop use. And they want the labs located in more convenient locations. Because we have so few, they aren't dispersed as evenly across campus as they might be. And even before we took over the labs, there were 2 or 3 lab locations that had been eliminated previously. And so that really cut down on the even spread of labs around campus. Although there are a lot of departmental labs in some of these areas, they may not be available for all the students to use. And so that's kind of one of the issues we have to address. Now, we are looking, based on the survey and the responses, we will keep expanding some of the existing capabilities and add new ones as we get funding. Obviously, funding is always an issue for us. But here are some that we identified with survey information and in talking to the students in the focus groups. One is obviously more group spaces. And to try different configurations, because I kind of like the fact that they're not all the same. And the same goes that supports what they found in the Terrapin Learning Commons in the libraries, is they have all different kinds of furnishings, and if you go up there, you'll find people using all of the different ones and some liking one more than the other. They also want us to provide more technology, the types of computers, shared monitors, some of those kinds of things that they would like. We also are looking at developing some practice presentation rooms, create some spaces with installed cameras and mics so students can record presentations either for practice or as an assignment to turn in. One of the reasons this is probably becoming a higher priority than it might have otherwise is that we have a new general education requirement in oral communication. And there's actually a course requirement. Many of the departments, instead of developing their own course, are just asking the communication department to offer more sections. Well, they have been the heaviest users of the capture capability in our classrooms, which is one of the reasons we're putting capture in all of our classrooms, so that that ability is available very broadly. But what we're finding is that a lot of the departments are also developing their own courses in this area, and we really don't have spaces outside of the tech classrooms with capture where students can go to do this in some kind of a reasonable environment. You know, I guess they can always use their smartphones and things, but sometimes they'd like to have something that's kind of a step up from that. Or especially if it's a group presentation they may be given, they may not be able to do that as easily in some other kind of environment. So we are looking at setting some of those up in our next round of improvements. And the other thing, we did get a number of requests for providing a little more editing capability, high-end machines for that, and not just out in the labs like our current multimedia stations, but enclosed little editing spaces where they wouldn't be disturbing people, and to have a little more specialized software than we have as a routine part of the image in the labs. Now, beyond the labs and the TLC, one of the exciting things is we're planning a new classroom building. So one of the things we've been doing the last 2 or 3 years is to try to incorporate some of these ideas into the construction and renovation projects we've been doing, so we can try them out before we have to decide exactly what's going in the building. So we'll know which things seem to work, which things people like and don't like. So we've been trying a variety of things. We've been putting more electrical outlets everywhere we can think of that we see people sitting and standing. Over there is our new journalism building, which is our first LEED certified building on campus that opened a couple of years ago. And again, the counter there has all the electrical outlets just like you find in airports. And most any time you go in during the semester, there's not an empty seat that's filled. We're also finding that a lot more departments even are installing chairs with the tablets on them to make it easy and to put electrical outlets near the chairs. That's over in our student union. They took this empty hallway type space and put a lot of different kinds of chairs there that are very accessible for students to use, and they also have some tables and chairs with electrical outlets, so that and when you walk by, you usually see lots of groups of students in there working. This is a lobby of a building, has nice soft seating, but what you can't see there is there are a lot of electrical outlets in the floor so that students can sit there in a group in a more comfortable lounge type setting to work on things as well. And in our engineering building, new engineering building, they have kiosks that they have, and then the little cafe tables and so forth. And we're seeing more and more departments doing this in their own spaces, as well as most of the new buildings we've had in the last several years have a variety of these kinds of spaces as well. So I think it's very obvious that the students are, and especially after they've been built, they are very heavily used. So, any questions, comments? What are you guys doing in your institutions? Sandy?
Wait, I'm going to come back.
Do you have a limit on the number of print copies that they can do, or are you
It's
charging
all
for
pay
everything?
for print. They
It's
have
all
to pay for
print.
everything, yes.
Okay. Was there any huge objection to that?
Well, it was, back when we first started doing printing, it was all free. And what we quickly found out, they were using it as copy machines. You know, they were printing out 100 copies of the resume on the printers in the labs rather than using the copy machines. And so that was when the committee that oversees the computer labs and such decided that they needed to look at having something, the pay for print, which would make sure we would have up-to-date printers and that they would be supported and all of that. So that was the decision that was made, and we've been doing that now for, even our old pay for print was pay all the way. They didn't have free. Joe?
I was kind of wanting to know what, on your collaboration tables, especially in the labs, are you putting a PC on those for students to use, or are they bringing in laptops, or both?
We've done both, and what we actually find, if it's a small group, they often don't even use it. They prefer to use their own, and if they're sitting there with a laptop, they can all, you know, if it's a small group of 2 or 4, they can see the laptop well enough, and they don't really want to bother. But we do have a number of the larger monitors there, and some of them do have the computers with them. Steve?
I see a lot of different types of furniture. How do you decide what sort of furniture you're putting in? Because there's a bunch of different styles. And yeah.
Well, starting out, because we didn't have much money, we made our own collaboration tables from existing furniture we had. We have some tables and some half rounds, and that's how we made our first collaboration tables. And because if you buy them pre-made, they're rather expensive. So we thought, until we know if this is going to be popular, we didn't want to spend huge amounts of money on it. So we built our own, and actually they work very well. So, exactly. We've been watching very carefully how the students interact with the furnishings in the Terrapin Learning Commons. We've also been looking at it in our labs and get feedback on it. So what we figured out is there's no one right type of furnishings. You need a variety because students work in different ways.
On the collaboration tables, one complaint we hear in our labs, you know, we've got the kids that want to collaborate, and then you got the kids that want to be quiet. They want to do their work. They want to concentrate. Some of our students have suggested having a lab that is a study lab, and then another one for the texting loud kids to be in. Do you run into that on your campus? And
We've run into that. I think primarily the people in the Terrapin Learning Commons have had more of that situation than we have. And basically, at times, the Terrapin Learning Commons, every seat is taken. And it does get loud because they are group tables and people do talk when they're working in groups. And one of the things that kind of has emerged from that is that if people want quiet study, there are 6 other floors or 7 other floors of the library they can go to. And so there are other study spaces dispersed throughout the building if they want quiet study. And another thing we notice is that a lot of times for quiet study, and even group study too, students will, crash into our classrooms. Even, if there's not a class in there, they'll just go in there and either study quietly by themselves or take a small group of students. So our classes are doing double duty as group space as well, and especially in those with the movable furniture where they can move it around and work in a group. That actually has helped the fact that we may not have as many formally established group spaces. That's kind of relieved some of the pressure on that.
A couple questions. So following up on what you're just talking about. Students that move around the furniture, do you go in and like reset the furniture to a set thing every day? And then a second question, sites that are off, like away from the library, like that one that's in the parking garage, how do you handle access control and security for that space?
Yes, furniture moves. We do, in the labs, we do have some student lab workers who go around regularly, and they'll kind of move things back in place. In the Terrapin Learning Commons, I'm not sure if the housekeepers do a lot of that or not, but yeah, it moves a lot. Every time I'm there, it's in a different configuration, which is kind of what they wanted. As to security, the libraries are 24/7, these parts of the library, so it's pretty much access and it is staffed. In our 2 24/7 labs, it's all card access, so you have to have a valid ID to get in. And that provides some security because some of the users are always concerned about security. So that does, we're in the process of installing security cameras in them as well.
In your planning process, did you evaluate using thin or zero clients, and maybe is anyone else here using zero clients, and what's your experience been? We just started over this last summer, and I guess there's good points and bad points to everything, but just wondered what everybody else's experience is.
Well, we've had a project that's been looking at virtualization for a while, and looking at that as maybe a possibility for us down the road. It's a multi-campus thing, and Steve, I think your campus has been participating in it. What we have done is we've moved to virtualized apps, and that has been the approach that we've taken rather than the thin client and all of that. So.
I'll do this one first.
Yes, on the installed monitors,
Mm-hmm.
when a student comes into the laptop, how are you dealing with all the different dongles?
Basically, we provide, let's see, I think a VGA and, let's see, an HDMI, I think. And most of our people, they know if you have a Mac, you have to bring your dongle. So that's kind of been, we do have a few for checkout, but for the most part, we rely on them to bring their own.
Okay, now if you're providing a VGA and an HDMI,
Mm-hmm.
are you then allowing just the set to do the switching?
Yes, we're trying it a couple of different ways. We actually have a little wall station controller that they can turn it off and on and change sources and adjust volume, because we didn't want to leave remotes in there.
Do you have any data on, if you don't have any data, I'll certainly take your educated guess, for the minimum and maximum participants in your group study?
No, because they move the furniture around however they want it, so we have no idea how many people may be in their groups. It would just be by observation of watching them. So.
Do you have a guess at a max?
Well, I think most of the time when I see groups working, it's usually anywhere from, if it's a small group, 2 to 4. Sometimes it may be up to 6, 8 max, I think, probably. Sandy?
I was just going to say that we did a big survey on informal learning spaces across the campus,
Mm-hmm.
and the big thing that came out of that was, yes, more group spaces wanted, but it's generally 3 to 4. That's
Mm-hmm.
the average size. You very rarely see a larger group. or smaller group than that. So.
That's the size I see most often, although occasionally I'll see some larger ones.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask you, I love the idea of the lab sandbox. Did you actually designate it as a sandbox? Do the students look at it as a sandbox, and are you continuing to get feedback on it?
Yeah,
and
we
how
are.
big is the room? Because you seem to have a whole bunch of
It's not a
different
huge
configurations.
room. I don't know square footage. You know, it's, yeah, we call it that. I mean, we call it by it's the Worcester Lab. It's in Worcester Residence Hall, but we call it our sandbox, and we've used that term when we've talked with the students about it.
The practice presentation rooms, we have that need. We used to have it, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and then we got rid of them, and now we've got a lot of faculty. We've got faculty that need those, and we have students that need it, and we have a push on our campus to do a lot more of that. It's extremely helpful for speeches, and also musicians and things do those types of things. The problem is where do you put them where you have acoustics?
Right.
Do you have any solutions for that, or are you struggling with the same thing?
We're just in the process of getting some set up, and one of our labs does have, it's an odd shape, and it's got an area where 3 of the walls are the poured concrete that around it, so we can easily segregate that one from the other. So it's got 2 wings like that, so we could easily do a couple of those to try them out and see. Steve?
I'll be back. Okay.
Oh, and Bev back there.
Camera in a room to see how the room gets used, but I got kind of shot down due to privacy concerns.
Actually, the folks in our imaging group and so forth, they track all of this. They can tell how many log-ons, how many unique log-ons per week, what software they're using. We use KeyServe, so they can give us all of the information on software utilization. So we have that available to us already. Oh, the physical spaces? No, we don't have a formal way to do that, especially if there's no technology in the group space. Monitoring the computers doesn't give you that information. Bev?
Oh, you're holding. I think you said that you took these spaces over. Who did you take them over from?
Well, they were transferred from another group within IT.
Oh, okay.
They were getting out of it, and since I was doing facilities, they thought it made more sense for them to be in my group.
Yeah, what group was that?
It was the Learning Technologies group. They're the ones right down the hall. I mean, we share the same floor. They're the ones who work more with the faculty and handle the learning management system and a lot of those kinds of tools. Okay. And for some reason, they got transferred to them. I'm not even sure how they got them transferred to them.
How many departmental labs are there? I mean, the number of labs you just said, and I think they're informal labs, right? Not.
Yeah.
Seems really small for size.
It seems small to me too.
Yeah.
We really don't know how many departmental labs there are. We, on occasion, try to send out a survey to the various colleges to get some feedback on that, but a lot of times they don't report back, or they don't really want people to know how many labs they have because they are restricted use. And so it's hard to estimate. I would probably imagine 20 to 30 maybe. I really don't know. That's just a real guess. You don't partner with them in any way? Well, we don't particularly, well, not a formal way, although we do collaborate and work on a lot of the same groups and committees that deal with some of the issues. The group within IT that does the imaging sometimes creates the images for those labs, but not all of them. A lot of the colleges like business and engineering and so forth and journalism, they do their own imaging, so, and we don't always know how many labs they have.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I've got a question. So do you have any reservable spaces? And if not, are you planning to have them reserved?
Yes, we have 2 reservable spaces. Well, we have 2 what we call computer classrooms that they're not for individual use at all. They are for classes that need computers for all of the students. But then 2 of our labs, open labs, can be reserved by groups, not regular classes necessarily, but occasional user kinds of things more. They're kind of our overflow group space. Anything else? Lots of good questions. I don't know how we are on time. What's our... Oh, wow.
Anyone want to dance?
Yeah. Or bring up any other topic?
Well, that was a fabulous talk and
Oh,
great
wow.
conversation. Thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah. Thank you.